Okay, so today's webinar is being recorded and live streamed on Facebook, and we will be able to, share this link with you after the event. So I'm Andrea Criado, the CEO of the Ishar Multicultural Women's Health Services, and co-hosting the webinar with me today is Dr. Bernadette Wright, who is a clinical psychologist and has been working in the multicultural sector for more than 25 years. Before we start, streaming the stories that we have to share, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land and pay our respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. If you have any questions during the presentations, we request that you type it up and just send it through to us. And during the question and answer session, we will have our panelists respond to your questions.
The seminar today, Living in a Pandemic, consists of stories of 5 multicultural people and their experiences. So bios of each of these people who you'll hear on the video have been sent to you as participants who have registered, and they will also be shared on the website subsequently after this event. A panel of 3 service providers who will discuss the following topics will also then be discussing this issue: the impact on young Khal people, mental health and well-being, economic hardships, and online education. And we would encourage that if the voice or the sound is not very clear when you hear the speakers, could you please use your headphones to facilitate your hearing. And the video length will be 20 minutes. Okay.
I'm Maria Arti and from India. I'm married for 5 years, 5 awful years you can say. I should say that 5 awful years. I got unfortunately or fortunately, I got a child, a daughter. The biggest mistake you can say, because I'm bringing a child with doubts with this man, my mistake. The poor child is suffering a lot of violence for the child, coming from India with this, this cultural background. If I say anything else, it might go against me, but this cultural background and this family of, and being the second marriage, heartbroken, but with some trust in God, I pushed, pushing to now, which is very, very difficult, very difficult. Every second, a fraction of a second is difficult. This COVID was very, very difficult because just before the lockdown, just after the lockdown, and during the stages where he was working from home and his mother being there, and Anvita just starting school, and just because she wouldn't say bye to her grandmother, she was being shouted at, and just because she was shouted at, I was shouted at because I'm not bringing her up properly, and my brought up is not. Same story from, hearing this, me, I'm not good, I'm this, I'm that, from Anvita will come to me. I can't even protect her too much because I know I will get it back, but I was protecting. My mind was going off, and then luckily I think she told in the school that, this has happened, and they were in touch with me. He chased me out at 9:30 in the night. He wanted me to get out of the house because Anvita did not speak to somebody from or something. I don't remember the exact incident, but she did not respect her grandmother or something like that. All this boiled together, he chased me out of the house, but then I knew I cannot get out of the house because of the COVID. I didn't know where to go, where I will be, what I will do. I had absolute no idea, and I was scared of this virus. Just so stressful to stay in the house. But I knew that one point in time, the time is coming for me to take a step to go out. Finally, one day, it burst out, and I was pushed and I was hit in front of my child. used all the languages on earth, shouted so badly about my family and me, calling me all the names, calling whatnot. That's when I said, okay, that is it. It's too much. During the lockdown, the worst, it is like sitting in a pot of fire. Sitting in a pot of fire, or I was sinking. Luckily I was getting those emails that gave me one confidence that okay, any emergency I can call. Because calling a police home in front of a child, and she's very, very shrewd. She's very knowing. My daughter, she's very knowing because at 3 years old, when he caught my throat, she went to the window and she said, "Police, come and help, Mama. Police, come, take Papa and go." 3 years. And she was three, not even three actually. She was going to be three, in fact. Last April it happened. And then, I didn't want her to see the father being, questioned by the police. And it's a big trauma for her to see her mother being hit. And on top of that, seeing the police, it was too much of a, I think it was too much to give that child that pressure of seeing all that violence and, even though it will be the right thing, but I just calmed, I closed my door in the bedroom, I slept alone with Anvita, and I didn't want to talk till I moved out. I moved out and I'm here now. I'm here now. I'm here now, and I'm still only here. I know Shalini told me that because of my willpower. No, Shalini. No. You all are giving me that willpower. If not for you all, no. Because I can't talk to my mother in the house. I have to go out and talk. I can't tell them because they're old. They're very sad that I'm going through this. I can't talk to any friend. Everybody's sad that I'm going through this. I only have y'all. I'm here because of y'all. That's it.
My name is Asadullah. My family name is Alizada. Originally, I'm from Afghanistan. So I worked with Afghan army around 7 years. And unfortunately, Taliban attacked and shot on the war time. They shot 3 bullets on head. After 2010, I am completely blind. So after that, I suggested to go to Pakistan because Afghanistan was unsafe for my family. I crossed border to Pakistan in 2010, I think. So we were around 4 years in Pakistan. I'm thinking about my family. They are like COVID-19 as well. So it is not only this COVID-19, we have another different COVID-19 as well, because unfortunately avoid parents, family, depression, like that. So we are thinking about they are unsafe in Indonesia, in Pakistan. So it is too hard because far away we living, we're not connecting to each other, we can't go there. Especially
So sorry. Just because of what's happening, you were planning to go to visit them, and the plans had to change, right? Because of the COVID thing.
because of COVID-19.
So you wanted to meet with your family there.
Yeah.
And so that changed, yeah. So,
Yeah,
so how has that affected you? I'm sure you're not being able to travel there. Because that was a big plan for you, right?
Yeah, before I had a plan to go there, so
Yeah.
now we change it because we should stay home.
Yeah.
So we should not bring, for example, a virus from
Yeah.
overseas to here, from here to another place,
Yeah.
like that. We should keep safe. We should take care about our neighbors, our people here. Yeah. So.
And you've got 4 kids, right?
Yeah, we have.
The kids are all back in school now?
Yeah, they are going to school, so still we are worried about.
What is
for them. Yeah, because we are not sure in this virus going for how many years. Or it is growing in another country. We are lucky we don't have it here like any corona. It is good for us, especially from the thanks from him. To control the border and keep it safe for the people.
Hi, I'm Elena. My experience of COVID-19, being in a multicultural family and being a teenager, has many ups and downs throughout the pandemic. For example, my mom has been brought up in a way that family is very important, so she was very excited to visit the Philippines, to see the family over there, and most importantly, to see her mum to prepare for her birthday, and just generally talking to each other and catching up. The whole holiday plan was cancelled, which disappointed my mum and the family in the Philippines, as well as everyone else here. Instead, Mum decided to spend money on the family here by bringing us out to get dinners and just enjoying meals together. I was given extra duties to help take care of the family more due to staying home. I had to take care of Zayden more often, who is my baby nephew. It was hard to juggle taking care of the baby and doing my schoolwork. I was quite worried about my relatives overseas and the ones in Australia. Things are different overseas, so I was worried about how well the situation was being handled and whether they were safe or not. Many of the neighbors in the Philippines couldn't go to work and earn money to feed their families. My grandma was worried about them and gave them rice. It soon grew to many asking for food, so my mum and brothers decided to give money to her so they were able to give more to the ones that were struggling. Mum said it's very important to give. I was quite worried about everyone there due to hearing that news, but as well as doing school during it all was very hard for me due to struggling to find motivation and to properly understand my subjects, as well as not going out and seeing my friends was tough. We were quite worried that our school year for seniors was going to be quite different, and if it would affect us in any way. Other than that, I found it was a time when my family and I could grow closer and just appreciate the fact that we had each other through it all. It made me just appreciate how important family is. Thank you.
My name is Shakila Afghanistan. I come from Afghanistan. I'm 7 years. I live in Australia. برای این کووید 19 واقعا خیلی استرس داشتم روزهای اول به خاطر مریضی خودم، به خاطر بچه‌هام استرس بیش از حد داشتم.
Couple of few days in the beginning, I had lots of stress because of this COVID-19, because of my health and my children. I was very stressed.
بعد خیلی رعایت میکردم. هر روز صبح برای بچه‌ها آبلیمو اینا درست میکردم و خیلی الان یک کوچولو آروم‌تر شدم.
I'm a bit relaxed now, but I was very conscious about health, and I used to juice lemon juice for children to drink in the morning, and I was very conscious about the health of my children. But I'm a bit relaxed now.
بعد بعدش این بود که از این اشار میومدم یا جای دیگه که به روزهای هفته میرفتم، چون همش خونه بودم واقعا خیلی برام سخت و واقعا آرزو دارم که زودتر آنلاین شور و حسد اونجا باز بشه. همین که از خونه میرفتم بیرون خیلی برام خوب بود.
Because I used to go to Ishar or I used to go out of home, it was much better for my mental health. but because of the COVID-19, I had to stay at home. I was really not in good situation, and I'm hoping that this restriction goes away and I can go out of home more and go to Isha or something like that.
آره خب خیلی سعی می‌کردم که تو حالت افسردگی نرم، چون من نسبت به مشکلاتی که داشتم و گذشته خرابه. خب همینه که میومدم اینجا میرفتم کلاس، خیلی برام خوب بود.
I tried hard to not to get depressed, and because of my history and my difficulties and problems and challenges that I had in my life, and then coming to classes, going to classes or going to Isha was very helpful for my health.
امیدوارم که دوباره همه چی حالت نرمال برگرده. بچه‌ها، کار بچه‌ها و خودمون دوباره به قولن راحت بتونیم بریم بیرون و همین که با خانم هستیم خیلی تاثیر زیاده داره رو روان همه.
I'm hoping that soon everything goes back to normal and everything goes okay even from my children, from my children's work and from myself and my family. And being with ladies that I used to go out with them, it's very helpful for me. That's
okay. Thank you. Hello, I'm Anush, and today I'm going to share my story. And so I'm almost 9-10 months in Australia, and why I came move here because I'm married with New Zealand citizen who last 10 years work in Australia and live. So first we live in Armenia, then we moved here, and because what happened between us, a terrible relationship, I just left him. Yes. For support, I was thinking I don't have any way, and the only way for me was blessing that. Yes, that for me is like was something blessing. I was thinking, oh my God, this is the only way. And when that accident happened, that when he beat me in the car and ran away to the police officer, was the first person who told me. I didn't know that in Australia there is a sport like this, because in my country, if I told I'm from Armenia, there is no support from women. I didn't know that there is a support in Australia. So the officer gave me the numbers. That was he told me. I was confused and very sad. He asked me if I want to charge. I even didn't understand what was charge. I was thinking, was charge ask money him or what? I didn't understand what that. And I said, I don't want anything from him. I just want to tell that he's not a nice person and I can't live life like this anymore. And he gave me numbers, and when I called, I talked with woman. Her name is like Vanessa. She made me feel happy. She told me, go cafe, drink coffee. And I say, oh really? I can go cafe and drink coffee? What she's talking about? I'm thinking, I'm planning to go to die, and she's telling me, go cafe and drink coffee. And it's of course relaxed me. She said, you don't have to worry. And after that, coronavirus started and border closed. Of course, I think for me that was more positive than negative, because first I wasn't ready to go my country. I miss my kids, but that situation, how I was, like I wasn't ready to go to hear people there, that culture things, and I wasn't ready just to go and start continue life like nothing happened. That I wasn't ready to do that. And at the same time, that Isha, Ruth and Chapul helped me to do would be good, but I think this coronavirus time, it's give me time to understand what's happening with me, to understand to recovery. I met counselor in Isha. I started to go for counselor in Isha. At the same time is positive pathways in Zonda. That was hard, but at the same time good, because you're taking over from you. You're crying, you're talking. Yes, it's hard, but it's good. It's not good to keep you inside you. But the worst things was for me, I started to not sleep at night. So after it's like, yes, that's all I accept that happened with me, and I'm going to continue live. I can bring my life back, but I will become maybe better woman than was with experience. And then I started to remember things. I didn't forget, but I was hiding. I was trying to talk about that. But then that was hard for me. A lot of stones heavy inside, like you, and you taking it everywhere. And when you start to talk, it's like going out. And that was very nice. And I'm on that process. Of course, she said it will take long, but I think this is really the right decision. So COVID made me give me chance to recovery and give me chance to do what I needed to do. If I just let somewhere, maybe I will not do this, and I will keep it for years. Yes. And of course, the Zonta sent us another houses. Really, everyone has his own room. I start to write poems, read books, which I always was dreaming to read because I used to be very busy single mom. I used to work a lot, didn't have time to read so a lot of the things. So of course I'm yoga instructor, practicing yoga with a woman in refuge, online classes with my countrywoman. Even I did yoga classes with my kids class online, and once a week we drink yoga in English. So yes, I think yes. For me, this COVID-19 time was positive. Time for recovery and time for answering what to do. And I did made right decisions to charge to him to make PRO the sexual abuse, because it's not right if he did it to me and me I will keep inside me, I will be unhappy. No, it's not right. And it's right if he will answer what he did. It's he did, he didn't do. I mean, I didn't do that. It's he did. So I need to live happy. I hope he will be happy, but he will answer what he did, so he will not do it to other women. Not, I don't even want to think about that. I will think about it now. So let's see what happens with him. What is the country will think it's right? The medical, the rights. I don't know. Maybe what I need to do. Thank you, Alma.
Thank you.
Okay, that was quite interesting, don't you think, Andrea?
Yes.
So I'm sure our participants would have a lot of questions running through their minds if the speakers were themselves here able to answer that. But for me, anyway, I don't know about you, Andrea, there was a lot of things that came out, the positives and the negatives of the pandemic. Certainly our last speaker then, effectively said there was a time that was imposed on her to just pause and recover. And then we had Sheila and Maria saying that it was an awful time because of the isolation and what was imposed on them when they didn't know the system. Where do you go when everyone's closed down? So I just don't know what were your thoughts?
Hearing all their stories, it was, or rather, I should say their experiences, it just has highlighted during times of difficulty, families that are already experiencing trouble, it has got heightened for them, whether it is their emotional health or accessing services, even continuing normal activities like education. For our young girl, Elena, who said she had additional family responsibilities. And this is something that is so unique to multicultural families that, have often large families live together. And it's not something that people might have even thought about.
Yeah.
On how, so it literally was her having to take on a new role of being a carer, along with having to complete her schoolwork.
Yeah, especially at the age that she is at. And,
Yes.
and what was a common theme for our speakers were those that have families overseas where the governments weren't coping too well with the pandemic. And and they were rendered quite powerless, to do anything really, apart from what Elena? Yeah. Her mother was able to send money just to, in the understanding that, without any work over there, how can the family survive? So again, those worries just exacerbated for some of our cohort that we're talking about here, the problems that were experienced during the pandemic. So it would be insightful to hear our panelists at this time from their various areas of expertise to talk of their insights into this whole issue.
So we've got three panelists with us today. We've got Pooja Menon, who is counselor with Youth Focus at Headspace in Midland, and where she provides long-term counseling for young people in the age group of 12 to 25. She has a significant experience of working with people from culturally diverse backgrounds and the LGBTQIA+ groups, and a particular interest in the intersection between them. So PJ also does community engagement work with the LGBTQIA young people and is heavily involved in activism in this space. We've got Paul Chang, who has been working in the not-for-profit sector for the Smith family since 2015, following a career of over 20 years in mining and oil and gas. Quite a shift there, Paul. He started as the Smith family's volunteer relationship coordinator for WA and in mid-2016 became part of the team looking after the Mirrabooka Communities for Children project. Paul loves working in this region, in the Mirrabooka area, and feels privileged to work with such a diverse and resilient community. And we have Pushpa Saroli, who currently works in the capacity of a senior mental health advocate at Multicultural Futures. Pushpa has over 20 years experience of working with clients from CALD backgrounds, supporting them to navigate services, especially health and mental health services. She's particularly passionate about providing accuracy and advocacy to ensure all services are equitably accessible to people of all cultures and backgrounds. So thank you, Paul, Pooja, and Pushpa. Just realized they're all P's. Yes, for spending time with us this morning and being our panelists. And maybe you want to share your insights around what you as service providers working in this space have experienced with the special groups that you've been working with. So any one of you can kickstart the conversation. Pushpa?
Okay. Well, the COVID times have been extremely challenging for us, and as all of our speakers have shared their experiences, I can say that I can relate to each one of their experiences, and it has been a mixed reaction for people from different circumstances. For those who are already in troubled relationships, I think, as Andrea said, the family violence has just heightened. And for those, because of the hardships and the job losses and other situations back home in their countries, for others, it has ignited violence in the families. I can also talk about some young people at home, like Elena, who have had additional responsibilities at home. I've had people who are the oldest in the family having to teach their younger ones, and parents expect them to do so much for the younger ones, and this has already also caused some kind of rebellious behaviors among the older ones at home, and not wanting to be at home because of this. And being stuck at home has also caused a lot of problems for these people. And for others who have missed out on their holidays and not being able to see their families back home, and saving money to send home to those who are unable to earn for their bread has also caused additional financial hardships here.
Okay. Paul, would you like to share some insights as to what the families who access our services have been going through?
Certainly. I think one key aspect is that some of our families felt a sense of abandonment, given that we pretty much, as soon as COVID hit sort of mid-March, a lot of the major players drop face delivery straight away. Obviously, you know, a lot of service providers moved to an online platform, and then also started, you know, thinking of different ways to modify their services so that they could maintain those connections. So a lot of child and parent centres sent out family packs, and part of during the delivery, you know, at a distance, that was one way that they could maintain isolation. For example, Ishar 2, the Neighbourhood Mothers Program on Friday, which is the key tenet of that is the face-to-face interaction on Friday mornings at Herb Graham. When that was taken away, I could see that would be a big loss for a lot of our families that actually went to that service. But what Ishar did, being very quick off the mark and proactive, was to institute welfare calls, just to check on the families that were connected, and also just to make sure that they were doing well. Interesting point with that is that this actually allowed some of the families to share issues and concerns that they would not normally share in a group setting. And the beauty now is that Ishar are going to continue this welfare call concept as a modification of their program, which is great. So I think with that, the speakers, they said that there were some mixed reactions. There's some positives and some negatives. So I think really there are a lot of positives that came out, you know, revised online delivery, new resources being developed, and maybe also reaching a new cohort of families that may have been reticent in joining face-to-face, like in person, but they might be more likely to sort of do an online course or something like that. So I think that kind of stuff is really important. But I think one point I want to make is that our families, especially in the Mirrabooka area, are very resilient. You know, a lot of our families that have come to Australia from a refugee background, they've done it very tough. You know, some have been in camps, they've had a very long process to get to Australia. So really, some of them have just taken this as another hurdle which they've had to overcome. And, you know, I'm just, as I said, intro, really privileged and proud of our families here. And I think as service providers, our role is really just to support these families, to walk alongside with them, and to really nurture these, what I term, natural community leaders that pop out of crises. And, you know, we've had all these wonderful initiatives that have come out, and really going forward, you know, how can we, you know, nurture those leaders to become the future leaders? And these are the, you know, whether it's an ethnic group or whatever, I think, you know, it's just lovely that these, I call them natural leaders, have come out and, you know, are doing great work. So that's it.
Pooja, would you like to give us your observations and insights about the pandemic and the effect on young people?
Yeah, of course. So I would say that in terms of challenges, when the pandemic started, we at Headspace started to move to our online services, so delivering via phone or video. And, you know, it was really great that we were able to keep providing a service, but there were quite a few challenges that came with that. So just in terms of just general kind of privacy and safety, a lot of young people who are wanting to talk about what's going on for them are talking about things that are happening in their families. And so the restriction on that from being in the house and, you know, being worried that people might be overhearing what's going on, not some of them being too young to have the capacity to have a car or to have somewhere they're allowed to go outside to take that call or to take that video, made it quite difficult for some of them in particular. I would say that also, as Pushpa and Paul have said, that for families who are already kind of struggling with complicated dynamics, things, you know, kind of just became a little bit worse because people weren't able to use their general coping mechanisms, whether that was going to work, whether that was going to dance classes or whatever it was, community groups, whatever it was that kind of was keeping them going. So it's kind of just putting a lot of people in one house where at really, really high, I guess, tension. So that was definitely a little bit of a challenge. I guess looking at young people specifically, it was also that they were expected to continue on with their schoolwork, and there was no real standardized way that was delivered. So I found that for some young people, there were online classes that they were mandated to go to, but for some they were just given the work and basically told to just do the work, without kind of any help. So there was, you know, the offer that teachers would be available at specific times, but they definitely lost a lot of the support that they would have had if they were going to school every day. So it's quite difficult that, you know, the world is kind of experiencing this pandemic. Everyone is kind of being given a little bit of a break to take a breather and to you know, be allowed a little bit of time to process what's going on. But some of these kids are going into exams, they're going into really, really difficult periods of their schooling without the appropriate support and expected to do the same amount. So that was quite tough. I would say some schools handled it well and delayed assessments or changed the way that they delivered assessments, so that was helpful. But for some children, I think that it was quite difficult. So in terms of what others have said as well, there was, you know, added responsibilities. So kind of learning how to juggle those things with schoolwork, with taking care of themselves, and, you know, just the fears around parents losing jobs, so additional instability in the home. So there were quite a lot of challenges in that way. I would say that in terms of positives that haven't been addressed yet, I would say one of the big positives, actually, that Paul, I think, touched on a little bit, is just that we now have delivered more flexible ways of delivering these services. So post-COVID, I think that a lot of these organisations are going to continue offering the phone and video, which is going to make a huge difference, because if people don't have, you know, the money to get on transport to come to their appointment, there's still at least a way that they can be delivered a service. So I would say that that's a pretty big, an important positive outcome that we've had out of the pandemic.
Can I add to this? Working with people who have extreme language and cultural difficulties, and what I have experienced was providing a service at this time has been extremely challenging. And most of our clients have had to learn how to use the phone, how to use a video phone, and keep abreast of all the letters and, you know, mail they receive. And that has been most challenging to these people. And I was wondering if that's something that we should work on, you know, providing our clients with some IT and digital literacy, which is just going to make them access services during times like this.
Could I comment on that particular situation, Pushpa? Because I know that many of the clients that we've seen here at Isha, because of that lockdown, many of them were getting communication, correspondence, etc., all in English. And definitely things were just on pause for them because they didn't know whether they were in trouble, whether they had to do something, etc. So, you know, the support just for those mundane things that we would take for granted was suddenly taken away, and that caused the distress as well.
Absolutely. And I had to teach many of my clients to actually take pictures of those letters and send it to me, so I could actually tell them, yes, this is something to worry about, this is not something to worry about. And it was interesting, most of those letters were basic, regular, mundane letters, but women who don't understand that, it's extremely distressing for them.
So what do you think that as service providers, we can be, you know, there are lots of people in the community that ask us, what can we do to help? So what would you say? I would like, you know, each of you to give us some insight as to what would you say general members of the community can do to help families during such periods of crisis?
One thing that stood out for me was parents unable to help their children with homework. And that was extremely distressing for parents who had no digital knowledge or IT skills to help their children, who were actually getting work over online. And that was something that stood out for me. And parents not knowing, how are we going to do this? I mean, this is for parents with children, but again, as I said, digital and IT things. I mean, if we could provide people how to use basic phone and video calls to actually access services.
I think I'll pick up on a comment that Pooja made on that issue, where there were no support for mothers who have children with learning difficulties as well. So the online programs were probably standardized, and yes, you can call the teacher, email the teacher, but often they were unresponded, these calls for help. And clients did not have the technical facility within their home to get the online, you know, continuously. So that really was a problem for many mothers.
Paul, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I totally agree with all those points that have been raised about, you know, moving to online platforms. And, you know, there were certainly, you know, I've got a lot of anecdotal stories of issues with, firstly, IT equipment, and then or lack thereof, lack of data. The other issue is not understanding the online platforms that schools require you to do. And, you know, I've had, you know, colleagues who are English speakers, and they were sort of inundated with emails from their school, and, you know, that extra pressure that, you know, if they didn't do this for their child, they, you know, they would be sort of letting their child down. And that kind of narrative, you know, is so common for our families, where they feel that they're not doing the best for their kids because they can't read, or they don't understand computers, or they can't supply that, you know, supply the equipment that they need. So it was good that in the Mirrabooka area, there were some schools that were going back to hard school packs that families would come pick up. And I think, you know, it's really important for us to really be the voice for our families, that not everyone has IT equipment. The equipment is one component, but the other point which you guys have touched on is lack of expertise in how to use it and how to access all that kind of stuff. So I think, you know, going forward, you know, this is something that we do need to potentially look at, collective in the community, given that we've got different service providers in the Mirrabooka area that have computers. I know Sudbury House have just got a new set of computers, which, you know, we could do that. Edmund Rice do that as well. But it's also just trying to find ways to engage our family in maybe not the classroom thing, maybe it's a one-on-one IT thing with a sort of a younger buddy or something like that, because in the group setting, that could be quite confronting for a lot of people too, because they don't want to be seen as being ignorant or, you know, not knowing how to use that. So I think part of what's come out of COVID is that we really do need to look at our service delivery and just try to, within our resources, limited resources, to make sure that it's the right fit for our families. You know, to me, it's just not just as easy just to get a translator and just, you know, do stuff like that. And I think we need to think beyond that. And we often wonder why our families don't engage with us, or they don't engage with services, or they're too hard to connect. It's not them, it's us. We really do need to have a look at our practice. I think the beauty of COVID is that we've been forced to really change our practice, and some of it works. Some of the stuff historically we would never even thought of, and we've had to move to it very quickly. A lot of the parenting have to be evidence-based, which is face-to-face. Now we need to relook at whether that evidence-based criteria is still valid with online delivery. And a lot of funding now is tied to programs being evidence-based. So I think what's come out of this too is that we probably need to have better relationships with universities to really help us as service providers with the evidence-based collection of data and all that kind of thing, because a lot of service providers, that's not our core skill. Our core skill is engaging with families or providing a specific service. Extra evidence and the academic side of things, it's tough. And I think, you know, if we can get universities to really help us, you know, PhD students getting real life, you know, work through that, it helps us, it helps our families, and it really does help the students as well. And I think, you know, students having a really good experience in the community. I want our uni graduates to really have a good understanding of community, what it means, and how important it is to be part of that.
I don't know whether you're alluding to this too, Paul, but I guess working with this cohort, it's not so much evidence-based, because we know the evidence is not there. You know, you look at the literature and really there's just a big gaping hole. So it should be practice-based evidence. If it works for the client, there's your evidence. Okay, so I think that's the platform we need to jump off from when working with this cohort.
you know, just with my program, Communities for Children, you know, we're obligated to have 50% of our programs on an evidence-based list, which is created by ACE, which is the Australian Institute of Family Support. So it's a federal government body. So I think, you know, going forward, you know, this discussion, Bernadette, is totally valid. You know, we need to look at how evidence is collected, because the other thing that I'm really conscious of is our families feel like they're surveyed to death. You know, they're like lab rats nearly, and I just want to get away from that, where it's that perception that we are doing to our families rather than with. And I think, you know, that really clear distinction that we really need to be conscious of, and, you know, we need to do better sometimes with our families.
I think this has been an extremely learning curve for all of us as service providers, because there's not much research, as Bernadette said. And I think what we have to look at is, what were the gaps, as you said? And for me, people are more interested to learn now. They have understood the importance of, you know, IT, digital learning, all of that. And many of my clients are asking, the next time there is an opportunity for me to do something at Edmund Rice, I'm going to go. I think that's absolutely positive. And I think for service providers like us, we have to become more creative, how to make these services more accessible and amenable to these people.
Pooja, do you have something to add to this conversation?
Well, I was just going to say that I really liked that idea of having young buddies, Paul. I think that could be a really cool, like, volunteer program for young people who are wanting to kind of make a difference and using something that they already know how to do to assist if, you know, something like this is to happen again, or just even generally, technology is becoming more and more kind of part and parcel of what we do. So I think it's going to be really important to upskill people in that way. I saw that someone in the comments had said something about initiatives in local communities, kind of getting to know your neighbours. I remember during COVID, I think people were doing that thing where they would stand on their driveway and people would have like a drink together or have a meal together, but just separate. And I think kind of organising more of those kinds of things, even outside of COVID times, could be really powerful, and a way that it could be continued. A way for us that we kept things going was through online groups. So I was part of running a LGBTQIA plus safe space in person prior to COVID, and then as COVID started, we started doing an online group once a week. And for the young people who came to that, there was at least a consistency, you know, in knowing that even though our face-to-face services might not be there anymore, we have, you know, something to do together. And for ones who had like a little bit of anxiety, we would do activities. So we would do like play Pictionary online, you know, just do little kind of lighthearted things that weren't all about the seriousness of what's going on, of what was going on at the time. So little breaks by using things that bring people together in that way.
Yeah. At Multicultural Futures, what we did was, I mean, similar to something the buddies, what the buddy program is. We have cultural ambassadors, and I'm sure Ishar has bilingual workers as well. We have trained them to actually be in touch with people from their own communities, so they're able to speak in their language and provide support to them in a way that is appropriate to them, because there are different ways people cope in different cultures, and I think we've used cultural ambassadors to do that with their own communities. Yeah. And that's really worked well.
Okay. So I have a question for all the panelists, because this has come up in other areas, and it's to do with, have any of your families experienced any form of racism as a result of COVID-19?
One Chinese.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Pooja. Go ahead, Pooja.
I was just going to say that I think there has been, in terms of even the young people at schools, there, as it was starting, just before people were sent home, there definitely was an increase just across. I think Asian people in general were getting a lot of flack. And, you know, as we don't really need to talk about American politics, but how the, you know, the big person over there is talking about this virus has really impacted on the way that other people are speaking about it. And that was definitely a source of bullying for young people going into the pandemic. I'm not actually sure how it's been now they're back at school, but that's definitely something to check in on. It's a good reminder. Thanks.
Yeah.
No, I had a couple of ladies, of Chinese background, who actually refused to take appointments, who canceled their appointments. And on calling them persistently, they said, no, we are not comfortable because I have a call today. And she didn't have a call. She didn't have a call. And it required a lot of persistence on our part to engage them, because it's about their own understanding of what people think about them.
Mm-hmm. Paul, did you hear anything from our families around experiencing this?
Not directly, but just you could see in the media that there was an increase, and I think part of it with anything to do with like race, even COVID, it's education, and that's a lot of from a lot of our families too, that they didn't really quite understand the information provided about COVID and all that kind of stuff as well. So I think with any trying to change how people think, education is the key. So I think, obviously there's going to be a spike in racism because of the narrative that's being fed from the US and, what we are hearing. But I also, love walking around the Square Mirrabooka and just seeing how multicultural, and I can safely say, the Square Mirrabooka is one of the most multicultural shopping centres I've seen in my life. There are other areas within Perth that are, quite white, so to speak, but definitely not in Mirrabooka, which is hopefully with that extra exposure that our next generation and future generations will get, that will help to sort of break down that sort of potential for racism. Because I think back when I actually sort of grew up in the area, and I went to Mirrabooka Primary, and in the mid-'80s or early 80s at the Square Mirrabooka, there was only a very few Asian faces here and there. And within 20, 30 years, it's changed so markedly, which has been such a benefit for us.
So we haven't got, this is for all the audience, the participants who have logged into the webinar. If you have any questions, feel free to type it up so that we can ask the panelists. And we, because we will be wrapping up this conversation shortly. Sorry.
I think some of the discussions that we've had actually brings to mind, the issues that since the COVID restrictions have been lifted, brings to mind issues that the clients here that we see are bringing up. And I think it was touched on before, where groups were shut down. So, in the therapy that we do here, we often get, clients to be more active, to be more engaged, and it takes a while to get them into those groups, etc. Then suddenly it shuts down, and we find when the clients re-engage with us, we're actually back at baseline. And that's just really so difficult and challenging for us to see that sort of, I suppose, relapse, for want of a better word. Yeah.
Yes. I think for many of our clients, the support groups were the only source of social contact, and they were completely cut off from this. And that was very, very distressing for many of our clients. And I'd like to highlight on another thing. I'm not sure if anyone else has experienced this. I see a number of people with asylum seekers who have absolutely no income support. And I think this time really caused a lot of distress to them, because they were not eligible to the job seeker or job keeper paying income supports. And also many of these people work casually and in hospitality and the food services industry. And all of these being shut has posed a huge financial hardship on these families, causing financial distress and again causing troubled relationships. I'm not sure what we can do in this area, but that's something that's frequently presented in our service, and that's why I just thought I'll bring it up so we could, if there's something that we could consider.
We've got a couple of questions that have come in related to health literacy, and there is saying that there has been some suggestions that in Victoria, people from multicultural backgrounds did not receive the COVID safe messages properly. And do you all think that is the same problem that we possibly could have here if we should experience another wave? Do you think our communities know how to protect themselves? And is there enough available in different languages to give this message out to the multicultural communities?
I seem to recall there are, the Federal Health Department of Health, put out a lot of resources in different languages and the like, which I think obviously was helpful. But I think, part of our role as service providers is to role model that behaviour. I've noticed that in parent centres, as you walk in now, it's quite clear. You walk in, sanitise, or you sign in, etc. So I think, our role is probably to role model some of that and really just try to
build on that. Yeah.
Make sure that they really understand what, rather than just hand something over to them and, hopefully, that they can actually read in their own language as well. And I think that's, we also need to be cognizant of, just because we translate something doesn't mean someone will actually understand it, because they may not be literate in their own native language. So I think part of it is also is something from, a simple, keep the messages simple and role model as we can. I think that's pretty much all we can do, because the government has been great in the response and, having courses in different languages. They did that very, very quickly. But I think maybe think beyond that.
Yes, but on that too, it's all very well to, as you all know, working in this field, all very well to actually translate things, but they take time to deconstruct those concepts into even more simple language that can be translated to the language.
Yeah.
We've got another a question here saying that as service providers, what are we going to do to ensure that we will be able to continue providing services and develop some of the services, that we've identified, like we identified from an HR perspective, doing welfare calls worked really effectively. And that is something we will continue even post the COVID period. So is there anything else that you all as service providers have identified that you will continue doing?
For us, just in terms of telehealth, I think Youth Focus is putting together a working group to make that a permanent part of what we do, just so that in the case that something like this is to happen again, we do have other ways to provide services that, and also just training for staff on how to deliver those services, because I guess a lot of people in mental health don't necessarily just work in a sit and talk kind of way. There's a lot more of the doing and a lot more of the kind of explaining, so how we can kind of do that in a way that's not face to face. So I think that's one of the main things that they're looking at doing here. And even within our groups, we're actually going to continue doing some of them online, some of them in person, just for the client groups that we can reach that aren't able to come into the face to face services.
We are also encouraging people to actually take on call phone interviews, so just so that they're prepared all the time, and so they learn to how to use the phone better. Phone or any ID for their appointments.
And going back to the the health literacy aspect, I wanted to just say that there was a lot of information being put out by the Federal Department of Health, as well as the Office of Multicultural Interest, translated into a number of different languages that we were putting out. But like Paul said, role modeling is very, is really important to teach our families basic and good hygiene. There's a question here. Somebody's raising their hand, but I can't see you. So you'll need to type in your question. Jamie Nguyen, if you can just type your question up, that would be really useful for us. And we've also have a few, which the rest cannot see, comments from a few organizations talking about this seminar being very interesting and useful. And I hope for all of you who have signed into this webinar, you have learned something and will be able to make some changes within your practices, within your own organizations, because that would just mean, people from multicultural backgrounds would have a variety of services that they could go and get appropriate services from.
I think there's some great points that are coming out in the Q&A part. Can we embed effectively, these new changes or these innovations is there a platform to share? Because I just thought that,
Yeah.
you know, strong is whether we share that information or share good practice. So again, it's how do we build this community of practice? Is it a closed Facebook group for multicultural service providers? You know, I'm sorry, I'm just talking out loud here, but I do think that we talk about this, it'll become embedded in our practice. And, you know, I would hate for us to revert back to, you know, where we were pre-COVID, where, you know, neighbours don't know each other, you know, where we're not really looking bigger than ourselves. You know, I don't want us to go back to that old way of doing stuff where we're, you know, that general level of unkindness, so to speak. So I think, you know, there are positives out of COVID that we really do need to look into, and how can we improve our service delivery. But I think part of it is just maybe advocacy, you know, like, you know, these new, as PJ said, you know, do work. So how can we embed that into practice, get that to the, you know, to government, so that they understand that, you know, sure, this is a new way of, you know, service delivery, but hey, it's still as effective, you know, and, you know, further to what Bernadette said, you know, build some evidence base behind that too, because, you know, with funding, funding is getting tighter and tighter, and there's more guidance on that funding as far as it has to be outcomes based, and, you know, has to have an evidence behind it. So I think, you know, part of this is, you know, how can we move forward to sort of lock in and consolidate these new ideas, again, whether it's partnerships with universities or, you know, even, you know, as a group of service providers, you know, do we, Andrea, do we engage, you know, Joel from the FSN to sort of, you know, we share stuff through the family support networks, plural, throughout Metro Perth? I don't know. I'm just, you know, talking.
Could I just pick up on something you said, Paul? Sure, we've got a lot of innovative ideas coming out here, but, you know, if we're going to be embedding them, I do think also that, you know, it's a case of the outcomes need to actually be modified to what are the expectations for the outcomes, because innovation will actually require new sets of outcomes, not the old ones where, you know, are quite unrealistic sometimes, that I find.
Yes. And just to pick up your point there about funding, because one of our participants have said that funding is generally a problem in the community sector, and particularly and often more so in the multicultural sector. So what has been, you know, how receptive do you think funding bodies are going to be to increase funding? If you're going to offer now multimodal forms of service delivery, it's going to have an impact on our resources. So any insight or feedback on that?
I think there's not necessarily directly related to funding, but at the start of the pandemic, I think psychologists and social workers found that they actually couldn't get the same billing from Medicare for online services. So they actually had to make like a really quick shift through, I think, APRA or the APS to be able to actually provide the billing for telehealth services. So I think that we are seeing, you know, at least an acknowledgement, but I'm wondering whether or not that is going to be continuing after the COVID period, and whether that's just something that we're going to need to push through our organisations in terms of explaining the importance of being able to bill for those sessions and get that rebate back. So I just wanted to comment on that.
I think it's upon us also to inform the funding bodies about the observations that we have picked up. So funding can be actually tailored. I mean, the services can be tailored to the needs.
Yes.
I also think there's a maturity in some of the funders now. They're actually seeing the impact of a different funding model. So, for example, Department of Social Services funds communities for children. So during the COVID outbreak, they were quite firm on that a lot of the milestones or the KPIs would not be met, but they were quite key that, you know, our money keeps going to providers to keep you guys in the community and funded. And I think that was actually a level of maturity, because it could be quite easy to say, no, pull that funding. So I think, again, it was nearly like the job keeper type mentality, where we do need a baseline level of funding to, and post-crisis, we need to have that capacity ready to go. And, one point that hasn't been mentioned here, but there's definitely going to be a lag of when the next hit on our services are going to be. Obviously, can't remember, Job Seeker has been cut, and, that's early September. So I think, a few months after that, we're going to see a lot of families, are covered on Job Seeker back under the poverty line. And I've got some serious issues. I think, a lot of families, with that COVID supplement were, inverted commas, enjoying things like having a haircut, normal things which Australian society, is normal. It's not a special privilege to live per se. So I think, it's as service providers to advocate, whether that's through, WACOS or the anti-poverty network or things like that. But I think, we do need to sort of speak up, because a lot of our families don't have the voice, and, we can provide on behalf of our families. And I just think the more advocacy, we are moving into, state elections next year, and then, the federal elections will be coming up. So I think, our politicians really do need to hear these stories, the good and the bad. And I think, one to try to change that narrative too is to have more positive stories from our communities of how well our CALD families are stepping up, those natural community leaders. And I think that, that'll help with education and also potentially, reduce racism, as people under the CALD community is not a drain on finances or, on the community. We are so much richer as Australians for having, people from CALD backgrounds, come to Australia. So,
I think that's a good point, because unfortunately sometimes when we think of the CALD communities, we're thinking of needs, special needs. We don't often think about, hey, what they've been able to achieve, and the strength and the resource that they actually provide. And it's that building of capacity that many agencies have been working on, and that's come to fruition. We don't recognize that.
Okay, so I would like to say that even with, though we, are a multicultural organization, I think all the funding bodies have been very, very accommodating. In fact, I'm very receptive of the changes we've had to make, very supportive in helping us formulate our plans for next year, approving carryovers of budgets that are left over from this year because we couldn't provide all the services as planned, but also with our state government response of releasing COVID-19 recovery funds, which have been targeted, have gone, and the Office of Multicultural Interest has worked along with Lotteries West to facilitate and move some of this money out into the community sector. It's definitely going to help us provide more mental health support and domestic violence support to our families as they go, come out of COVID-19 and through the recovery phase. So I really think our state government is doing a phenomenally good job in ensuring that the most vulnerable people in our communities, whether they are from a CALD background and experiencing domestic violence or drug and alcohol, homelessness, vulnerable people are going to get additional support.
I think it has been extremely flexible as well, the funding bodies, and that's allowed us to provide the services our clients need. Yes.
So I think this has been a really informative discussion with all the panelists, and I would like to thank all of you again for joining us, for sharing your insights, and for answering the questions from our audience. We've had quite a few members join us today, and I thank you for showing your interest to understand and know more about how the pandemic has affected people from migrant and refugee backgrounds. Please feel free to share the link to this webinar. It will be available on the HR website for a few more weeks at least. It has been live streamed as well on Facebook. And we also had the ABC interview us this morning, and they will be putting this webinar on their website as well, just so that it has the opportunity to go out to as many members of the general population as possible. Yes, once again, thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have. And we look forward to hosting you again in a few months' time, maybe 3 or 4 months, at another Let's Talk Culture seminar. Okay, thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you all. It was a pleasure.
It was great. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.